get from any point to any other point. And then he ran a couple of Tor servers and watched the latency between when stuff was going back to Alice and when he was receiving connections again. So even though he wasn't able to watch the first node in Alice's path, he was still able to say, hey, it takes about 70 milliseconds. And here are the sets of places in the world that are 70 milliseconds for me. So I can now narrow it down to, I bet the client's in Virginia or something like that. So that's still an ongoing work to figure out exactly how effective these attacks could be, but potentially very effective. So the next step would be to figure out how to defend against this sort of thing. Another good paper, Stephen Murdoch, who's I think in the audience over there and presenting next, had a paper at PET on sampled traffic analysis resistance. So he looked at internet exchanges. There's a really big one in Amsterdam where they push through gigabits per second, so they can't record everything. So they just sample it. They take one packet out of every 2,000 packets. So then he looked at logs like that, saying, okay, what happens if you just sample, and figured out good traffic analysis attacks where you just get a smidgen of information on this side and a smidgen on this side, and you can still figure out, yeah, this person was talking to this person. So that's kind of scary too. Another interesting paper at WPES a few months ago, there was this fellow who figured out that since Tor clients believe the bandwidth and uptime claims of Tor relays, then you can lie. You can say, oh yeah, I can handle a gigabyte per second and I've been up for 17 years. And all the Tor clients will say, oh, that's great, he's so fast and he's so stable, I'd love to use that one. It turns out that you can run a small number of servers without many resources and attract a whole lot of users that way. So we've been moving towards having the directory authorities or other Tor servers actually measure these things, and we take the majority or something like that. So you don't just believe whatever some server shows up with. Tor's guard nodes are looking increasingly good. So the guard node idea is when Alice is connecting to the Tor network, she picks a small set of servers, maybe 3 or 4 of them, and she always uses those as her first hop. And that means that if you don't pick the bad guy as one of those 3 or 4, then you're in much better shape anonymity-wise, because they're very unlikely to be able to see the beginning of your circuit and the end of your circuit. Whereas before we used guard nodes, you just keep picking a random first hop over and over. And eventually you're going to pick a bad guy first and last, and then you lose. So all of these various research papers that are coming out, every time I read one, I say, oh, I'm really glad we implemented guard nodes because that helps that attack a lot. And there's a bibliography down there, freehaven.net/anonbib, if you want to read all the other research papers that are coming out. Okay, so that's a little bit of what we've been up to. And then some more discussion. Data retention. Hopefully this is a topic that's on everybody's minds at this point. I've been getting a lot of mail over the past couple of weeks saying, I don't know if you're aware, but soon all the Germans are going to log everything, and should we stop working on Tor, or what should we do? So there's a lot of discussion here, and you should keep going to the other talks on it, but I'll give you a couple of ideas, the most common things that I answer when people are talking to me about data retention. One of the big ones is, remember Tor's threat model. If there's an attacker at the beginning of the circuit and at the end of the circuit, then assuming they know some statistics, they're in really good shape. So it's not a matter of having at least one node in the circuit be honest. We need to have the beginning and the end, not both bad. So if you have one node in Germany that's logging everything, and it's at the first hop, it's your guard node, and then you've got some website, say, in Germany, that's good enough to break Tor. So we can't just say, limit at most one node in Germany. We have to be a little bit smarter than that. Maybe we have to say, logging nodes in the first hop. And then another question, what do we mean by logging? How many layers of logging are there? Everybody thinks about this in terms of, if I log at my computer, then we'll have logs, and if I don't log at my computer, then nobody will know any of the packets that went back and forth. What happens if your ISP writes everything down? What happens if your ISP's ISP writes everything down? How many layers of logging are we talking about? Are there going to be 5 different copies of all these databases? And if you can break into any of these 5, then you win and you learn everything that's been going on at that ISP? Hopefully we'll find out over the next year. And then how safe are these logs? Who gets to access them? I've heard the phrase real-time access. I guess that means we distribute public keys to every policeman and we hope that they never lose them, and oh my God, that's never going to work. We'll find out what that turns out to mean as people start to clarify these. But I guess the key point is none of this is going to be enforced until 2009. So 2008 is when we figure out what they really mean. So from the Tor development perspective, we don't have to rush to implement something next month because we don't know what the heck data retention is going to end up meaning. From your perspective, that means you've got a whole year to fix your crummy laws. So get out there and advocate and teach people and figure out how to make this law go away. As an example, like 6 or 7 years ago when I was first getting into this privacy advocacy stuff, I was talking to the chief technology officer of Bermuda. And I was there with a couple of other cypherpunks. And Adam Shostak went up to him and said, there's this crazy new law that the Americans are trying to push through, and let me tell you about it. I don't remember which super DMCA or whatever one it was. And I said, but that law is crazy. It's never gonna happen. They'll never pass a law that's that crazy. And he pulled me aside afterwards and said, the reason why they don't pass these crazy laws is because people like us tell them about the crazy laws and explain why they are crazy. So that's the story to remember there. Law enforcement. There have been several Tor-induced raids in Germany over the past years. There was a big one in September 2006. And periodically I hear from other people who say, yeah, they busted down my door and 6:30 on a Sunday and dragged away all my stuff and scared my wife. And yeah, so I guess there are a couple of interesting perspectives here. One of them is I only hear these stories from people in Germany. I don't know what's going on with German law enforcement, but they're really harassing people in Germany in a way that other countries aren't experiencing. So it might be really useful to teach a lot of law enforcement people here how the internet works. There are these things called bot networks, and there are bad people on the internet, and sometimes they do bad things. And often when a computer does something bad, that doesn't mean that the guy sitting at the computer is the criminal. There might be some guy in Russia or Africa or who knows where they are. So one of my hobbies has been to teach FBI officers in the US about internet security and tell them this is how Tor works and these are all the good users and uses of Tor, so that if they ever encounter an issue with Tor, then they'll know what it is. They won't have to learn all about it in 1 hour and then go arrest the guy in the next hour. So a corollary to that, if you know any German law enforcement who speak English and are open to learning about this stuff, please introduce me to them, and eventually I'll end up in their city and I can give them an overview of Tor and answer all the questions they've got. I'm going down to Stuttgart next week to talk to a bunch of law enforcement there to try to teach them about Tor. The other half of that, lawyers. In the US, I have lawyers following me around saying, I look forward to the Tor case. In Germany, there aren't really that many lawyers who know about Tor and care about defending people. And part of that is because of the US's notion of legal precedent. It's really valuable to get really good lawyers to take on the first case in the US, because if you can make sure to establish a precedent, then you actually change what the law means, in a sense. In Germany, it feels like every case is on its own, and sure, I could defend this person, but there's just going to be 12 more after them, and why bother? So we really need to get more European lawyers to care about this stuff and to understand Tor and to be willing to say, I need to help defend my society, I need to help make sure that these crazy laws don't actually end up causing people to get arrested and causing problems. So go out there and meet some lawyers, civil liberties, human rights, whichever sorts, and teach them about Tor, introduce them to each other. That's one of the big things that we're missing in Germany right now. We need a huge pile of lawyers following us around saying, I look forward to the next Tor case. And then another piece of that, we have a US legal fact written by EFF. With 12 questions, what happens if this, what do I do if this, and there's a phone number from a nice EFF fellow who answers. You call him up and you say, I just got this piece of paper from the police and I don't know what it means. Can you help me understand what my rights are and what I need to do? We've got a few people at CCC who can help with that, but we really need more people in general to help actually document these things and teach the operators about what the laws mean in Germany. Okay, other fun stuff. Snooping on exit relays. I have a lot of people come up to me saying, "Did you hear about the embassy password thing?" So yeah, there's been lots of press. I guess the first point is if you plan to wiretap, most countries have laws against it. So check with your lawyer before you want to become a criminal. I guess that's the first step. Another point to reinforce is Tor hides your location. It doesn't magically encrypt all the traffic on the internet. So the traffic that goes through the Tor network, while it's going through Tor, it's encrypted. But once it comes out, again, it's whatever you sent. If you're using SSL, great. If you're just browsing normally, make sure you don't send sensitive traffic. It's the same as if you're using the normal internet. My connection at home in Cambridge, I use an open wireless to connect to my shared community Comcast cable modem connection. Anybody who wants to, within like a mile of me, can watch all of my traffic when I'm not using Tor. So, I mean, Tor doesn't magically introduce a new problem, it just shifts the problem. We encrypt your local traffic, but again, there's an issue at the exit node. And I was reading an article that Wired wrote a little while ago, and they were saying those Tor users are so dumb, they don't even use SSL. So I went to Wired's webpage, and they've got a little login link at the top. It doesn't use SSL. They don't even support SSL. So there's a deeper problem here than just we need to educate all the users to click the encrypted link. We need to get all the servers noticing that encryption on the internet might be useful. I mean, this has been an ongoing problem for decades now, but I'm not sure how to solve it best other than making more and more people aware of the issues. And there are a few things we might do. Mike Perry, one of the Tor developers, is working on a library called TorFlow that lets you actually test. You build a circuit, you go to some website. If it gives you a bad SSL certificate, then you mark that exit node as kind of sketchy, and if you keep seeing bad ones. So that might be one way to notice. But if people are simply observing traffic, it's pretty hard to notice that they're doing that. Maybe we should do some plain text POP or IMAP logins for dummy accounts and then go see if anybody logs into them. But that's not really an arms race that's easy to win. Okay, other exciting stuff. Theory. Hard to tell. I don't know what people use Tor for. Tor is slow because a handful of people are running file sharing applications on it. Seems reasonable. I mean, I talk to people every so often. I mean, the Azurius BitTorrent client has a little button that says, put all my stuff through Tor. So I imagine some people are clicking that. How do we make the jerks who are overloading Tor overload it less? There are a few options, but none of them are very good. One of them is we could traffic shape the high volume flows. We could say, well, you've been pushing lots of bytes around, so I'm going to give you lower priority. The problem with that is that BitTorrent considers this an attack and defends itself pretty well. It's constantly making new connections. So we can't really squeeze BitTorrent down that way. Another approach, people periodically say, but Roger, I can run this snazzy new protocol analyzer on my exit node, and if I ever detect file sharing or other bad stuff, then I'll just kill the connection right there. That might work for a little while, but there are a couple of problems. Probably the biggest problem is the liability question. Right now, if you're just a relay, if you just move the bytes back and forth and you don't care what you're sending, then you're just a relay. You're just like a telephone company or an ISP. But if you start taking responsibility for killing certain connections and letting other connections through, then suddenly you might be liable for messing up. If you ever skip a connection that you should have killed, it's your fault that you skipped it. So that's not really a slope that I want to fall down. And then there's the question of neutrality. We're supposed to be a TCP proxy, so shouldn't we proxy all TCP, not just some TCP? And then another fun question, who runs the relays? Once upon a time, at the very beginning of this, you had to send me mail saying, hey Roger, I'm that guy you met at the conference. You convinced me I'm running a Tor server. Here's my email address, my PGP key, my fingerprint for the Tor server. That scaled even less well than I thought it would. So that worked up until maybe 15 or 20 servers, and then people started sending me mail from other countries, and do I turn them away and we end up with a Tor network with 30 nodes forever? Or do I say, oh great, another volunteer, you're even from Russia, great, diversity. So there's still a tension here between, do we grow a Tor network that's